Hi, welcome to the Take 5 podcast, the show that helps strengthen firefighters in protecting those relationships that matter most. I'm your host, Lee Sullivan, licensed mental health counselor and certified emotionally focused therapist. I'm so glad you're here today. Hi. As a first responding agency, you understand that the increasing demands from our communities are putting increasing demands on our fire service personnel as well. This is causing an internal mental health care crisis. Providing mental health care is no longer an option for agencies, it's a necessity. As administrators, you're having to become experts in the field of mental health care services and navigating mental health culture. The problem is that mental health is a specific field of study. And just as you might feel outside your scope of expertise, many mental health practitioners are also feeling outside their scope of experience. Most mental health practitioners lack the cultural competence to be able to come along first responding agencies, specifically fire service, in order to help bridge the gap between these two cultures. So this video was created to help provide a bridge between mental health service and fire service, hoping that it will help you to navigate putting together your own mental health program specifically for your frontline personnel. Right out of the gate, I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself in case we've never met before. My name is Lee Sullivan. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Washington. I'm a nationally board certified counselor. I'm a certified emotionally focused therapist, and I hold a PhD in trauma and crisis counseling. My specific doctoral dissertation work was on resilience building for firefighters. I'm a former volunteer fire chaplain, as well as a frequent presenter on cultural competence to mental health professionals who want to work with first responders. I have a private practice where I work exclusively with first responders, mostly firefighters, and I'm a developer of a mental wellness program inside a fire department where I work inside the firehouse alongside frontline personnel. And I tell you all this to reassure you that I have cultural competence, and I've carefully designed this particular episode to help build a bridge between the two very different cultures of mental health service and fire service. As you create your own mental wellness program within your agency, specific to the unique needs of your frontline personnel, my hope is that this episode provides some useful tools for you to help guide as you construct your agency's program. Thank you so much for listening today. There are essentially 4 pillars to a mental wellness program within fire service. This is not from a book. This is from my own experience. This is from my own dissertation work. A whole lot of research went into this, and this is just what I came up with. I have never seen it written down anywhere, and certainly I would cite that research if I had seen it anywhere written down. So this is my own little idea, but this is what I see, and this is certainly what I implement in my own agency where I work. 4 pillars of a mental wellness program: administration, peer support, chaplaincy teams, or they're also starting to become crisis intervention teams, that's the new name, and mental health practitioners or mental health professionals. Administration are the gatekeepers to funding, and benefits and overseeing the general well-being of frontline personnel. They establish the boundaries with which everyone in the agency has to work. These are the only options within these boundaries that admin provides. And so that initial structure or the guardrails that admin offers is vital and important. Peer support. Peer support provides immediate support from a shared language and shared experience. Lay counseling interventions and suicide assessment and referrals for higher level of care happen from peer support team members. Also, peer support members need their own supportive care as well, but they are an integral part of a mental wellness program within fire service. Chaplains or crisis intervention teams, which they're becoming more popularly known as. These folks are vital when personnel are experiencing an existential crisis, when their personal morals and ethics do not align with what they see on scene, and it causes a disruption. Chaplaincy teams are fantastic for handling that. They can also provide community resources, and so crisis intervention teams can, and staff chaplains especially, can also oftentimes help act sort of as a liaison or a sort of like a social worker supportive role in providing community resources for either higher levels of care or just different kinds of care that frontline personnel might need. Mental health professionals, or MHPs, are the fourth necessary pillar of a mental wellness program. They provide the professional credentialing and the educational experience of a higher level of care directly within a fire service or a firehouse, even if they're allowed to go in. They can also provide training to the peer support teams and the chaplaincy teams. But they bring a level of professional knowledge and experience that the others aren't able to provide. So a MHP can sort of legitimize the resources within your mental wellness program. Each pillar provides something unique and something different that the others are unable to provide. There is crossover in some of these areas, but each one of them provides something that the other doesn't. And so we really need all four pillars so that we can have a sturdy foundation of a mental wellness program within our fire agency. Not all mental wellness programs are created equally. There's a difference between behavioral health models and mental health models. And so let's talk about the differences. Behavioral health is for immediate interventions. These interventions are used to help relieve distress in the current moment so that you can get back to a current level of functioning. So it's a quick intervention. It's meant to be short term. It's meant to help you just readjust to a current level of functioning so that you can get back in the rig, get back to the station, get back on call. It's not meant to be a long-term intervention. Most agencies have already, all this time, had behavioral health programs in place, like EAPs, and peer support trainings are often, every peer support training I think I've been to has been a behavioral health model. And we'll go into more details of what that looks like in just a minute here. Mental health models are therapeutic interventions to treat the symptomology with the goal of healing. So these are much longer term interventions, longer term goals, and most agencies do not know to even put this into place. Most agencies, because you're so accustomed to the behavioral health model and behavioral health interventions, that you just naturally put that into place. But those are short-term interventions. And so we need mental health models at this point in time to heal the impact of these critical incidents you continue to experience. So because most fire service agencies don't know to put them into place, they don't understand the difference between therapeutic interventions for mitigating the impact of critical incidents. So let's kind of untangle this even more here. There are cognitive or behavioral models of care, and there are attachment-based models of care. And this is going to kind of take us down the road of therapy a little bit here, but as you all are having to become mental health care experts, let's just put this information in your tool belt so that you can make some effective decisions for your own agencies. So cognitive or behavioral therapeutic interventions. So you might have heard cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, or behavioral therapy. These are immediate interventions used to relieve the distress so that, again, you can return to a current level of functioning. They're short term. These models are used within the behavioral healthcare system or behavioral health system. Some examples of these are going to be very familiar to you. Mindfulness techniques. Breathing exercises. Wim Hof is super popular right now. His breathing exercises are behavioral healthcare interventions. Self-care regimens. Exercise regimens. Any regimen, it's a behavior that you are changing in order to hopefully feel different. And that's exactly what it does. It helps you feel different in the moment. Okay. Ice baths, massage therapy, nutrition, a nutrition regimen. These are all behavioral health interventions. The existing research shows that these interventions work in the immediate moment. They're good for bringing someone into the present moment so that they can mentally and cognitively return to work, return to the scene, return to active duty, keeping themselves and their crew safe. They're meant to be short-term intervention strategies, short-term solutions. They're not healing interventions. Let's be really clear about that. They're not going to heal the impact or the wounding impact of trauma as a result of the critical incident. They're most impactful for short-term, the here and now. They help get folks through the immediate distress until they can work toward longer-term recovery. Okay, so it's sort of like a first step intervention, behavioral health. Working in conjunction with these short-term behavioral health interventions are attachment-based interventions. Attachment-based therapeutic models both relieve current distress and they improve future functioning. So this is because attachment-based interventions are trauma-informed and they're focused on healing the wound or the injury as a result of experiencing a critical incident. So let me pause here for just a moment. A critical incident is not always experienced as traumatic to an individual. You and I can experience the same scene. As a chaplain, as a fire chaplain, I experienced many scenes of death. Gruesome to not so gruesome, like many. You and I can experience that same scene and it might be traumatic for me, and it may not impact you that same way. And so because it is experienced differently by each one of us, how we experience it, if it shifts your world, then it's considered traumatic. How it impacts how you experience feeling safe or not safe. That is the key differential marker in determining whether or not you can say it's traumatic for you, and I say it's not traumatic for me. All right, so because trauma is dependent on the individual's emotional experience of that critical incident, healing that injury or wound requires emotional engagement and attachment therapy. It requires emotional engagement, it requires attachment type of work, because we consider it an attachment wound. I hope. The most empirically supported model of attachment-based interventions is what is called emotionally focused therapy. Okay, and that can be used for the individual or a couple. But research shows that emotionally focused therapy specifically, as mitigating the impact of critical incidents up to 36 months past the end of treatment. This is 3 times longer than any of the research that we show for cognitive behavioral interventions. So those short-term interventions we just talked about moments ago, they're the first steps to getting you back to a current level of functioning, but research shows they're not healing the injury which you have determined you've experienced as traumatic. And so for that, what we need is attachment-based interventions like emotionally focused therapy. And so we need to start including that in our mental wellness programs. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to build resilience for our frontline personnel. If our frontline personnel need a new higher level of functioning in order to adapt to these new demands in fire service, then we need resources and interventions that help support this. Behavioral interventions alone are not shown to do this. And so that is the point that I'm trying to get at today. Our agencies must incorporate attachment-based interventions in order to actually in every pillar, all 4 of the pillars of a mental wellness program, in order to build and maintain resilience to the impact of critical incidents. So, administration. An admin needs to have a comprehensive understanding on the fundamental differences between behavioral health and mental health. You also need to have a little bit of an understanding between cognitive and behavioral interventions, which are short-term, and attachment-based interventions, which are empirically shown to have a 3 times as lasting of an impact on mitigating the distress of critical incidents. Okay, so that is all for admin, so that you can best define and find the insurance programs and find the best EAPs and the mental health professionals and find all the best resources that provide some level of attachment-based interventions and are not only behavioral in nature. Peer support teams. Peer support needs to be taught these attachment-based interventions and not simply behavioral or cognitive behavioral interventions. That's great, but You can also Google, you can also go online and discover what are some behavioral interventions for mitigating stress. Okay, you can look those up. Within 30 seconds you could have 12 ideas on behavioral interventions. We need to teach our peer support teams attachment-based interventions so that immediately in the rig on the way back to the firehouse, the same day of, when you are immediately providing support, you can have something that is not only going to help mitigate the distress in the current moment, but also help build your peers up to increasing their resilience for the next critical incident, which the tones could go off, and that next call is another critical incident. You just never know. So peer support teams need to be taught attachment-based interventions as well as a part of their training. Chaplain teams and crisis intervention teams need to be taught attachment-based interventions so that when they're repairing the injury of an existential crisis for our line personnel, they can help them to build that resilience for the next time, because existential crises happen constantly, because what you morally accept in your own life is absolutely night and day difference from what you experience on a scene. So crisis intervention teams also need to be taught attachment-based interventions so they can apply them immediately as soon as they see that crew, and do a debrief or pull them aside and talk with them. Mental health professionals need to not only have cultural competence, but they need to be educated in attachment-based interventions along with the cultural competency piece. Otherwise, MHPs and therapists, through insurance and EAPs, they will misunderstand what is happening for a firefighter. They will misinterpret a protective response and deem it to be the problem for the firefighter. And therapy instead will become focused around negotiating behaviors and expectations. And this is where therapy, in my opinion, fails firefighters. I have an episode on that if you care to look up more information on that. So we need our MHPs to have an understanding of attachment-based interventions and along with their cultural competency. So this was a lot of information to take in today. Thank you for sticking with me as we went through all of this, as we talked about outlining the 4 essential pillars for a mental wellness program for your agency. We talked about and distinguished the difference between behavioral health and mental health models. We separated the very important differences between cognitive and behavioral interventions from attachment-based interventions, and discussed when each is appropriate to use. And we also discussed which interventions promote resilience and which does not, so that you can best utilize your resources in a focused effort to create a successful mental wellness program for the unique challenges and the unique opportunities and needs of your personnel at your agency. I hope that you found our time valuable. If you know of another agency who could use this information, please feel free to forward it. We do not charge for this podcast. It is meant and intended to be no cost support for our fire service agencies and our frontline personnel. And so if you know of someone who could use it, please forward it on to them. All of the references that I've cited in today's podcast, all the research that I've done, I list all of that out on the website take5withlee.com, and you are welcome to look all of that up and and get in touch with me if you have any questions or comments. Thank you again for sticking with me today. I hope that this helps you to navigate the nuanced differences between all of this mental health care and support as you figure out a mental wellness program for your personnel. Be safe and be well. For a list of references used in today's episode, please visit our website at take5withlee.com. You'll also find more resources for first responders that have been vetted for cultural competence. Remember, what we see, we can change one feeling, one message, one conversation at a time. Thank you for joining me as we learn to tap into our emotion signals, which will ultimately build resilience, protecting and preserving those relationships that matter most. Be safe out there and be well.